Okay, so this video is to demonstrate to students how to sketch using an iPad. So I'm using the iPad Pro, and I'm currently using a second generation pencil. And the software, the app that we're using is Adobe Sketch, which I believe to be free for, I guess, for anyone with an iPad. Right? All you have to do is just download it from the App Store and log in with, I think, your Gmail, and that should work. So this app is pretty simple. It actually interfaces pretty well with Photoshop if you have the Adobe Creative Suite. This is not the only sketching software that's out there. There's so many different ones. This one just happens to be free, and I started out here. Uh, but pretty simple software. We'll just start by talking about the interface. This is the main splash screen when you start up. It has all your previous drawing. You can sort your drawings, or your you can sort your the projects you're working on by clicking on the three dots over here, which will allow you to kind of change the order based on date, and so on. Date, modify, and name. Okay. So on the bottom, you can discover other people's drawings that are really interesting. And the settings will just be your Adobe account, and so on, right? That doesn't really change anything. So I'm gonna go to work for now and just click on the little plus button at the bottom, and that allows you to create a brand new, canvas for your drawing. So I believe I'm going to start with, just, the iPad, right? It's the right size. And here, looking at this interface, you can see how, you can close your project on the top left and just start over. On the right are some tools. We'll get to some of these later. And on the left, I guess on the left right here is like some of the most important things, which are your brushes, right? First one's a pencil, second one's a pen, third one is a brush. And if you look further left of them, right, you'll see the color they're currently on. So the pencil is just gray. And if you tilt the pencil, you can actually shade with this. If you straighten up your pencil, you actually can draw. So tilt function is actually kind of helpful. Pen, I don't think pen has that tilt function because pens is just always singular, right? Like it has only one width, whereas a pencil, if you tilt it, you'll get more lead on the paper. There's the watercolor. Well, it's just a brush, and then the next one's oil brush, and then I guess the second to the last one is watercolor. And you can see how if you click on it, the it'll actually expand over time. You can kind of see that over here. Just take a look at this area once I click, and you'll see how it wants to expand and grow and so on. And you can stop the expanding by hitting the, you can tap the little like fan button at the very very bottom. So let me try it again. So you can see how it's growing, 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 and if I tap the fan, it just stops the growth. And lastly, you have right here, this is the erase tool. So this allows you to kind of erase everything you've drawn, right? Um, I'm just going to erase everything for now. For every single tool, you can click on it a little bit more. You can click on it a second time and you can see how you can change the size of the brush, right? So you can start small, medium, and then get really large, right? You can change the flow, which is the opacity of the brush. So I'm going to start small again. You can see how like flow is really low, so you can't see anything. But if I turn it up to 20%, you can see how it's really light. 50% a little bit darker, and 100% is full on there. Color, that allows you to change whatever color that you've got. So I have a library of colors that I use a lot, just because I use this to sometimes uh, kind of comment on students' drawings. But I have a library of things. But you can also pick your own library using the picker. You can use a color wheel, RGB, or history is what you've used last. There's themes, you know, all these colors that are already kind of picked out. So I'm just gonna stick with my library. And at the very bottom, you have some other things. I haven't really messed around with this so much, but it's been pretty helpful to kind of like allow you to change how the brush behaves. So you can essentially design your own brush, right? Do you want it to be, do you want it to flow a little bit faster? Do you want the size of the, I don't know, the size of the brush to be a certain, size? Yeah. So those are all the options within. So each one will have different options, but usually the same ones, right? So we're done talking about the tools. Let's talk about what's on the right side. The right side are layers. So you can see how I've been sketching on the sketch layer, right? Sketch layer is pretty much just the layer where you're gonna draw on at that particular moment where you put your pencil onto the screen. If you're drawing on a background, well, the background already has this kind of like gray layer of color on it. If you draw on that, you won't be able to erase your paint on that layer without erasing the background as well. So I highly encourage students to create more layers as they are sketching, right? So creates layers like this so you can kind of draw on top of things, right, on top of each other. And then if you want to turn a layer off, you can double click on that layer and then it hides itself. Much like Photoshop, anything that's on top, right, will basically cover over what's below. So if my drawing, this is currently my oil drawing, is on top of my watercolor drawing, you can see how it's covering over the watercolor and you can't see it. Obviously, you can kind of hide it, and you'll see it under, but anything that's on top always covers what's below. So keep that in mind. You also have the ability to click on a layer and just, like let go, and you have the ability to change the opacity, right? So this oil painting can be like a lot lighter. There's other things like merging layers. Transform allows you to resize what you've drawn on that layer. So these are all kind of like things that are helpful for like quick manipulations. You can also like paint inside something you've already painted. So on this layer, I painted the red, right? I've only been painting the red um, on that layer, and now I'm gonna draw within the red, and you can see how like I'm just brushing everywhere, but like it only draws within the red. So you can paint inside something you've already drawn so you don't affect anything else. So that's quite useful because if you want to create a certain shape first and paint inside that shape, that could be also really interesting too, right? So let's see. We kind of cover a lot of this stuff already. I want to kind of start this by showing you how to draw a couple things. So for one, you can always add an image to this canvas by trying to add another layer, but you have two choices: sketch layer or image layer. If you add a sketch layer, right, you basically have the ability to go search on your iPad and look for images that could be useful. So in this case, I'm gonna bring in little iPad, and once you bring it in, you can use your fingers to pinch it to resize it. So since I'm going to show you guys how to sketch using this as an example, I figure I'll just have this up so it's be easier for me to analyze or show you the analysis of how I think about sketching. Hit done when you finish. So let's start this off by like just saying that, yeah, you can actually do a lot of hybrid drawings using an iPad. You can make the drawing or the image you brought in light, and then draw on a sketch layer above it, and then you can add details to a drawing that you've or a photo that you've already like started, right? So you can see how you can do drawings on top of drawings or on top of images, right? So there's that ability that's quite helpful. Um, but also, I'm just gonna in this particular video, I want to focus on like showing you guys how to actually just draw the thing that you see. So here we have an iPhone, and I'm gonna try to analyze it to show you um, like how I'm thinking about drawing this. So before you even start, there's a couple things that you should, before you start drawing, right, you should consider. For one, you should really consider what is the canvas size, right? So this is a square kind of canvas for the phone. So therefore, like if I'm going to make the same drawing or as close to the same drawing, I want to make sure that I have roughly the same sort of square format, right, set up. Next, kind of just look at the drawing a little bit and kind of see, okay, so like where are like my phone starting and ending. So you can see how it's starting. This is maybe about 1/5 of the way into the image, and the bottom is like maybe 1/8 of the way in. So if I kind of set up those lines on my own sort of canvas and kind of get a sense of where things are, I think this is about a third over here. So maybe somewhere over here. So that means that my phone corners are like here, something like that. So you can kind of find these points pretty quickly. Um, and the other thing is like you should really not look at this phone as this like super crazy rounded object, but rather start with a box. As much as much as we know that this is a box per se, the primitive that make it up is a box. You just kind of round off the corners and round off things, right? So kind of want to start that drawing in that particular way. Try to treat it like a box, right? So see if you can kind of find a box, right? So the way I'm going to start this is I'm going to start this by making a brand new layer, and I am drawing with the pencil first. So drawing the pencil, I've got my frame, I got my like kind of canvas size set. I'm just going to draw like kind of a quick like set of lines to kind of, oops. See, this is where it's useful to be able to undo. I messed up on that line, and on this corner right here, you can see the little undo button right there, right? And then what you can do is you can just click it, and then you'll be able to back up one step. And if you want to back up a lot, you can hit this time, and then it allows you to go all the way back or all the way forward. So I'm just going to be right here, and what I like to do is I like to twist my canvas so I can draw lines a particular direction, right? So, if it's not comfortable for your hand to draw in one particular direction, twist the canvas, right? So something like that. And then draw the box as it extrudes up, you know. Oops, clicked on the wrong layer. Sometimes your palm gets in the way. Okay, so got a simple kind of extruded box. Now I'm gonna start rounding off the corners just a little bit, so just so you can see. Now you don't really need to be too accurate when you're drawing with the pencil, because this is really supposed to be just kind of a quick uh, rough dimensions. If you spend all your time like dealing with the details right now, right, and getting super super careful, what if some things don't look right and you need to erase? You just spend all that time, putting all your effort into making it look pretty, and then you find out it's wrong, and you need to change it, and now you're erasing a lot, right? One of the ways that I kind of tackle this is like I just kind of really quickly try to just figure out like what are some things I should be looking at. Like, okay, so how do I find the middle of my, I guess, middle of the phone, so I can kind of see like where this button, or at least where this where a whole bunch of information is, like the top, port, the top like kind of audio speaker, the camera, right, and the button, they all line up to the center of the phone. So one way to kind of find that is like to draw an X, and wherever the X intersects usually is where the center is. So I can find my own, right, and then I can see that this is roughly where this reset. This is roughly where the center is, right? Now I don't really need to like spend too much time on it. Just draw the screen. Oop, gotta go back to my pencil. Draw the screen in here, and then I can draw in my little button and some other things. And remember, once again, this is supposed to be just kind of like the quick, dirty version of this, and then you can kind of go back and add more details later. Once you're sure that these are the positions of the objects that you want to add. So I'm not going to draw all the icons of the phone. I'm just going to kind of put something in here. So I got roughly the right objects in here, and then I'm going to move on to creating another layer, and that will be my pen layer. I think I really enjoy using the brush rather than the pen, because it feels actually more like a Sharpie. The pen is just kind of like one whiff. And so what I usually do for these sort of sketches is I try to kind of give the outline a little bit of attention, right? So the outlines is usually the outer boundary of an object. And I try to like draw a little bit of details on here, like, but not too much. And then I get the complete outside like enclosed, with this thicker line, so it pops off the page immediately. So you know this immediately establishes that this object is off the page. And I can tell you right now that I feel like the perspective is off a little bit. And if I just undo it, I can kind of redo some of this, right? So if you were really slow to adding all the details, you might not be able to like you might not want to fix it, because you discover you spent all that time like drawing this, and you have to like undo a lot of stuff. So I'm making the backside, this backside, right, a little bit shorter than the front side, just a little bit, so it looks like the perspective is a little bit more on point. Yeah, so you can see how I shrink this part just a little bit. Okay. And usually this doesn't take very long. If I'm drawing, I'm explaining a lot of the thinking process, so it's a little slower. So now that I've got the thick line on it, I can do like all the thinner details over my pencil. And this time I want to be a little more accurate than what I was before. So here I am just drawing it in. Something like that. I think I'm adding as much detail as I want, but this time as accurately as I can. Yep. Because now we're using a pen rather than, the pencil. And once you got something with this level of detail already, you're ready to kind of color. You're ready to color in more things. So this is where I will create another layer. And just remember, like every time you're using a different medium or adding details where you might want to erase it but not affect the things that you draw, you can always just add more layers, right? So the pen layer usually is on top. The watercolor layer, which is the way that I'm going to be shading, is probably going to be little bit. It's going to be underneath the pen layer. So I'm going to color in some gray, have some flow on here. Uh, and we'll just color in as much as we can, right? Like um, we can color in the medium grays first if you like. So here I'm just drawing in the grays as much as I can. You can see how like immediately it kind of gives it a little more dimension to the drawing. Don't forget to like use the fan to to stop it from expanding. It does want to expand pretty quickly. And just adding in the gray on the side of the phone, right? And the more like layers you draw with grays, the darker it becomes. And of course, you can always change the color to a darker, color. So that would be your maybe your 70% grays. Uh, so let's see. Yeah, something like that. And then you can add in like the area on the screen, so you can see how the screen is kind of a color on its own, right? So in this particular case, it might be good to talk about a concept of just painting more, right? And then erasing after. So I'm going to paint a lot. Uh, and then I'm not being super accurate about the painting, but it's okay. So I'm painting this much, fanning it, maybe painting a little bit more, fanning it, and then go back and erase. Just remember, we're on the watercolor layer, right? Not the pen layer. The pen layer is fine. On the watercolor layer, I'm just going to erase, the parts that I kind of screw up on, uh, the ones where it spills out of the screen and onto, I guess, onto the phone itself. Yeah, so something like that. And um, what's really interesting about drawing with on an iPad is that you can always like go back and add details, turn off layers, and they're kind of helpful to kind of see see more or less detail. Like for example, got this layer of the pencil sketches. I can tone it down a little bit in opacity so it's not so heavy. Right, there's that. Uh, if the if the sketches for the sketch layer is too dark, right, you can also change the opacity a little bit, right? But overall, I think that's pretty quick and easy. I by no means is this perfect, but it was quick. And if I wasn't explaining the process of how to do this, I would be able to finish this really quickly, probably within 4 or 5 minutes, or maybe even less. So this could be a pretty quick method of making this.